Starting at 50 is late, and you're probably still ahead of millions of people. Both of those statements are true. That's the problem. Most people hear the first one and stop listening. They hear late, and their brain fills in the rest. Too late, missed the chance, game over, retirement gone, life over. But reality is stranger than that. Far stranger than the story your fear keeps telling you at 2 a.m. when you can't sleep. The median American between the ages of 55 and 64 has roughly $71,000 saved in a retirement account. Not $1 million, not even close. $71,000. If that number feels shockingly low, good. It should. Because somewhere right now, there is a person with $300,000 saved who feels like a complete failure. And somewhere else, there is a person with $20,000 saved who genuinely believes they're doing okay. The numbers matter, but something else matters more: the story people tell themselves about those numbers. By the end of this, you're going to know exactly how bad starting at 50 really is. Not emotionally, mathematically. You're going to know why some late starters retire comfortably, while others work into their 70s. You're going to discover the mistake that destroys more retirement plans than starting late ever could. And you're going to hear something that most financial content will never tell you, because calm, informed people don't click on ads. Because starting late is expensive, but something else is catastrophic, and almost nobody talks about it. The strange thing about retirement is that people don't compare themselves to real people. They compare themselves to imaginary people. The imaginary person started investing at 22, never got divorced, never lost a job, never had a medical emergency, never supported aging parents, never made a bad decision under pressure, never missed a payment because a child needed surgery, never existed. But that's who millions of people measure themselves against every single day. And when you compare your real, complicated, imperfect life to somebody else's invented perfect life, the result is always the same. You lose, even when you're winning. There was a comment I read recently. A man said he was 50 years old. He had about $210,000 saved. His house was paid off, no car loan, no credit card debt, and he was convinced he was way behind. Think about that for a second. No mortgage, no debt, hundreds of thousands saved, a paid-off home that most Americans will never own outright, and still afraid. Why? Because retirement fear isn't created by math. It's created by comparison. And comparison creates a very dangerous question. Not how much do I have? The dangerous question is how much should I have by now? Because once your brain invents that number, once the imaginary benchmark takes root, reality starts looking terrible, even when reality isn't terrible at all. Let's make this real. Meet Mark. Mark is 52 years old. He lives in Columbus, Ohio, works as a maintenance supervisor for a public school district, earns $74,000 a year, drives a 2016 Toyota Camry, packs lunch 3 days a week, watches retirement videos after dinner, the ones that usually make him feel worse, not better. And every Sunday night, he opens his retirement account and feels something close to nausea. His balance is $68,432. Age 52. $68,000. In Mark's mind, retirement isn't difficult. It isn't challenging. It's over. He doesn't tell his coworkers, doesn't tell his friends, doesn't bring it up on dinner. He carries it alone the way people carry things they're ashamed of. What happens if I can't stop working? What happens if my health changes? What happens if I outlive my money and I'm 79 years old with nothing left? The devastating part is Mark isn't unusual. He is everywhere. Millions of people are having the exact same silent conversation with themselves, and most of them believe the problem is the number in the account. It isn't. Not yet. Because before we talk about retirement math, we need to talk about something far more dangerous: panic. Panic has destroyed more retirement plans than late starts. Panic has destroyed more retirement plans than recessions. Panic has destroyed more retirement plans than market crashes, bad presidents, banking crises, and financial scandals combined. That sounds impossible until you see what actually happens. Imagine two people. Both start with exactly the same amount of money. Both invest in the exact same index fund. Both experience the exact same brutal market crash. One person stays invested. The other person panics. That's it. That's the only difference between them. 10 years later, they live in completely different financial universes. Not because of intelligence, not because of income, not because of luck, because of behavior. And that's where the retirement industry gets uncomfortable to talk about. Everybody talks about returns. Almost nobody talks about reactions, because reactions are hard to sell. Fear sells better. Fear gets clicks. Fear keeps people glued to headlines at midnight. Fear makes people buy courses and books and subscriptions from people who make money off your anxiety. But fear is catastrophic for building wealth, and late starters are especially vulnerable to it. Because every market drop feels personal. Every red number feels like lost time. Every downturn feels like proof they were right to worry. And that's exactly where the trap begins. The trap that turns late into impossible. The year was 2008. For a lot of people, it felt like the financial world was ending. Not exaggerating, ending. Retirement accounts were getting crushed. News anchors looked genuinely terrified. Banks weren't just struggling, they were collapsing. Every headline sounded worse than the last. Then something extraordinary happened. Some people lost money. Other people lost time. The second group suffered damage that can never be undone. Because losing money and locking in losses are not the same thing. One is temporary, a number on a screen that hasn't been sold. The other is permanent, a decision that can never be reversed. The investors who stayed invested eventually saw the market recover, then grow, then reach new highs they couldn't have imagined in 2008, then grow again. The investors who panicked sold near the bottom, moved everything to cash, and waited for things to feel safe again. And safety finally arrived after prices had already recovered, after the opportunity was already gone. Think about how strange that is. People waited for proof that danger was over. By the time the proof arrived, the opportunity had already passed them. The market rewards patience. Human beings reward certainty. Those two things often move in opposite directions. And if you're starting at 50, that tension becomes excruciating because you don't feel like you have time for mistakes. Every downturn feels bigger. Every bad year feels more threatening than it did at 30. That's why the biggest risk for late starters isn't the market. It's the temptation to abandon the plan at exactly the wrong moment. Mark doesn't know that yet. He's still staring at that $68,432, still imagining the worst, still convinced everyone else is miles ahead. But let's do something most financial content never actually does. Let's run the numbers honestly. No fantasy, no guru math, no millionaire by Thursday nonsense. Just reality. Mark is 52. He contributes $1,000 per month, $12,000 per year. Nothing extraordinary. A lot of households spend that much on car payments. Assume his investments grow at an average annual rate of 7%. Not every year, some years higher, some years lower, but 7% on average, which is historically conservative for a diversified index fund portfolio. Now here's where people usually stop listening, because $452,000 doesn't sound impressive, not in a world where social media constantly shows people talking about their first million at 35, their second at 40. But retirement isn't impressive. Retirement is income. Those are completely different conversations. A person with $1 million and enormous expenses can struggle profoundly. A person with less money and lower expenses can sleep soundly every night. The account balance alone tells you almost nothing. That's another trap people fall into. They obsess over balances. What actually matters is cash flow, monthly, sustainable, reliable. A paid-off home changes retirement entirely. No car payment changes retirement. No credit card debt changes retirement. A deliberately smaller lifestyle, not a deprived one, a chosen one, changes retirement more than almost anything else. Most people don't realize this because they're measuring retirement the wrong way. They're measuring wealth when they should be measuring required income. And that single mistake creates one of the largest financial illusions in America. Two retirees can have identical account balances. One feels rich, the other feels broke. The difference isn't the money, it's the lifestyle attached to the money. There's another story most people never hear because it's boring, and boring doesn't go viral. A woman named Susan worked for a regional hospital in Indiana. She started taking retirement seriously at 49, not 25, not 30, 49 years old, looking at her account and realizing she had been sleepwalking. She didn't suddenly double her salary, didn't discover a secret investment no one else knew about, didn't inherit money from a distant relative. She increased her contributions every year, even when it was uncomfortable, reduced unnecessary spending, not painfully, but intentionally, stayed invested when the market dropped and every instinct screamed at her to sell, ignored the noise that demanded her daily attention. And something remarkable happened. Not quickly, not dramatically, slowly, the way real wealth always works. At 66, she retired. Not wealthy, not famous, not featured on a finance podcast. Comfortable. She visited her grandchildren without checking her bank account first. That was the whole dream, and she got it. That's the part the financial media consistently misses. They love extremes, complete failure, massive success, nothing in between. But most retirements happen in between. Most people are not trying to become billionaires. They're trying to buy groceries without anxiety, visit family without calculating whether they can afford the flight, sleep through the night without their finances waking them up at 3 a.m. Have choices. That's what this is really about. Not, can I become rich? The real question is, can I still have a life? And that is a completely different question with a completely different answer. Now, here's where things get genuinely uncomfortable. Because starting at 50 absolutely creates a disadvantage, let's not pretend otherwise. You lost years of compounding. Those years matter enormously. Someone who invested $500 per month starting at 25 has an enormous advantage over someone who starts at 50. That is true. It will always be true. No amount of motivation changes the mathematics of time. But here's the part nobody explains. The person who started at 25 isn't your competition. They never were. You don't retire against them. You retire against your own expenses, your own needs, your own reality, the specific number it costs to sustain your specific life. And once you understand that, truly understand that, something shifts. The scoreboard changes. The internet scoreboard says, look how much someone else has. The retirement scoreboard says, can your income support your life? Those are completely different games. Playing the wrong one is costing people years of their lives. Mark has been staring at the wrong scoreboard for years, and because he's been measuring himself against a fantasy, he's about to make the exact mistake that quietly traps late starters forever. The mistake feels responsible. It sounds logical. Most people, most financial advisors even, will nod along when they hear it described. But over 15 years, that one decision could silently cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And once you see it, you will start noticing it everywhere. The mistake is not starting late. The mistake is acting like starting late means starting scared. Most people who begin investing at 50 immediately become terrified of risk, understandably. And because they're terrified, they do something that feels responsible. They move their money into things that barely grow: cash, money market accounts, conservative bond allocations, bank accounts earning almost nothing after inflation eats it alive. And the logic sounds airtight. I'm behind, I can't afford losses, I need to protect what I have. But that's exactly where the trap is hiding. Because if you're behind, you actually need growth more than almost anyone. Imagine two 50-year-olds both start with nothing. Both invest $1,000 per month. Both stay consistent for 17 years. The first averages 7% annual returns. The second averages 3%. At 67, the first investor ends up with roughly $425,000. The second ends up with roughly $267,000. Same person, same contributions, same timeline, same discipline. Nearly $160,000 difference. Nothing changed except growth. Most people think risk means losing money. Real risk is running out of time while your money barely moves. Read that again. Because a lot of late starters are so determined to protect themselves from short-term losses that they accidentally guarantee long-term shortages. That's the invisible enemy. That's the thing nobody's making viral videos about. And this is where Mark's story changes. Not because his salary changed, not because the market handed him a gift, not because some guru appeared with a secret, because he finally understood what game he was actually playing. The game was never building the biggest account possible. The game was buying future freedom. And freedom has a specific, calculable, achievable price tag. He calculated his retirement expenses, actually calculated them, not guesses, not vague fears, real numbers, line by line. Housing, insurance, food, transportation, utilities, healthcare, entertainment, the things he actually needed, not the things he feared he might need. And after doing that work, he discovered something that completely reordered his thinking. The retirement he actually wanted cost dramatically less than the retirement he had been terrified about. The fear was bigger than the math. It almost always is. Because too late and not ideal are not the same, not even close. Would Mark have been better starting at 25? Of course, everyone would. Would he have been better starting at 35? Absolutely. Would he have been better starting at 45? Without question. But those versions of Mark don't exist. Only the current one does. And the current one still has 15 years, maybe 17, maybe 20. That's not a short amount of time. That's a career. That's enough time to raise a child from kindergarten to adulthood. That's enough time to pay off a mortgage. That's enough time to completely rewrite a financial future. The people who fail are often not the ones who started late. They're the ones who convinced themselves that late meant impossible. And once you believe impossible, you stop acting. Once you stop acting, the outcome becomes real. The self-fulfilling prophecy completes itself. That's why panic is so dangerous, not because it feels bad, because it changes behavior permanently. A person who believes they're doomed rarely saves aggressively, rarely invests consistently, rarely sticks to a plan long enough for the plan to work. They surrender years before they actually lose. Which brings us to the sentence that changes everything. You are not behind because of the years you lost. You are only behind if you stop using the years you still have. That's the whole thing. That's the sentence. Send it to someone, your brother, your sister, your friend who's convinced themselves the game is already over, the person you love who has stopped trying because they heard starting at 50 is late and let those 4 words become a life sentence. Because most people aren't actually looking for financial advice. They're looking for permission. permission to believe the future can still improve, permission to start today even though today isn't 25, permission to believe that the years remaining are more powerful than the years already gone. Mark is still waking up at 6:15, still driving the same Camry, still drinking the same coffee before the same commute. From the outside, nothing changed. But inside his head, everything changed. The panic disappeared, the scoreboard changed, the mission became clear. He stopped asking, "Why didn't I start sooner?" He started asking, "What can I do with the next 15 years?" That is a powerful question, because unlike the first question, it actually has an answer. Age matters, behavior matters more. And the behavior that matters most isn't finding the perfect investment. It's starting, staying, and refusing to let fear make your financial decisions for you. If you've made it this far, if something in this landed, share it. Not because the algorithm needs it, because someone in your life right now is having Mark's Sunday night. They're staring at a number that scares them. They've already decided it's too late. They're wrong, and they need to hear it from someone they trust. That someone might be you. Subscribe if you want to keep thinking clearly about money and a world that profits from keeping you confused, because the next video covers something even more unsettling. The real retirement killer might not be starting late at all. It might be something millions of people do every single month without ever realizing it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it.